sort of stuff. And it occurred to me that taking you along on this journey might be a little bit interesting. Be interesting for me to see how I actually do it. So earlier on in the year, I was working on and hoping to get finished this particular quilt, Margaret Mew design, and I started machine quilting it and didn't like it, so I pulled it all out and decided that I would do things the way that I wanted to do things, which was to go with my original decision, which was to hand quilt the quilt. I was asked last week at Guild about hand quilting because I had this with me and I was quilting it. And the comment was that they wanted to hand quilt, but they decided to hand quilt something because they didn't want the expense of sending it out to a long armour. Completely get that. But also didn't think it was good enough for them to machine quilt, which I found a really interesting comment. My advice to that person was that, hey, besides the fact that you do whatever you want, when we're hand quilting, we're spending an awful lot of time with things and it's a lot of effort. So if you're going to hand quilt something, make sure that it's worth the effort. There are lots of ways to finish quilts quickly. You can tie them, you can straight line quilt them, you can all over meander. I do all of those things. But if I'm spending quality time with a quilt, it's because I'm hand quilting it and it's the effect or the end effect that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I mean by effect, because it can come down to the weight of the thread, how big the stitch is, all the rest of it. So what we'll do is we'll go off and have a look at that, and I'll show you some of the quilts that I've made and that I've hand quilted, and then we'll come back to this one and I'll show you approximately what the plan is today for what I'm going to be doing with this one. And then in a few months' time, we'll find out if I stuck to that plan or if I changed it, which is extraordinarily likely. All right, let's go look at some quilts. Okay, hand quilting. This here is one of the earliest pieces that I hand quilted. It's faded, but it's faded beautifully. It's probably about 25 years old. We can have a look. Now, the stitching that I've used here, the thread that I've used here, is just a quilting thread. It's really fine. It's held up really well over the years. Like, none of the stitching has popped or anything like that. I'm really happy with it. It's a small piece, really, but what it is, it was what I was stitching on the sidelines when my boys were little and playing rugby. So I can do hexagons, and I have done hexagons, and I probably will maybe perhaps one day again. So this was English paper pieced, but the batting that I've used is actually a woven batting, and it's really fine. There is next to no loft. It is just there because it's a quilt and it needs 3 layers. That Debbie Mum has faded quite nicely. But yeah, just standard quilted, about 1/4 of an inch in on all of the hexagons, and then I finished it with a knife edge. So everything's turned in and stitched. Hey Lily. The first quilt, are you going to help out here? You're going to help out here. The first quilt that I did what we would recognise as big stitch quilting is this one. This one is a medallion quilt, all improv pieced and all of that sort of stuff. I will pop a picture of it up so you can see what it looks like in all its glory. Last week when I was talking about Wuthering Heights fabric. There's some. Let's turn the cataract. So what I've done here is I've used Pearle 8. So rather than using the really fine thread, I've used a thicker thread, and I've used different colours in different places. So here is cream. I've also used pink, a variegated one here across the centre, blue, and this very modern quilt, but I did it all in my favourite repros because I could. Next is the Big Sky Star quilt. And I'll link all the details below for where to find these patterns. Now, I love the Lone Star quilt, and this is a really good example of what I'm probably doing more and more of now with the different coloured threads, in that I've got the background thread, which is, this is what it's, I'll talk about it when I show you downstairs, but it's basically this colour but in thicker weight, and then a blue in the same weight, where I've quilted the feathers, and I quilted the feathers so that they were going onto the quilt and then off, and it was trying to create some movement. This is kind of the direction that I'm in now with hand quilting. We see, hand quilting is I find it quite relaxing and really enjoyable, but it can also be really interesting, and you can do a lot of really interesting things with it. You can also do a lot of really simple things with it. So the last quilt that I'll show you before I head downstairs and do some quilting is currently on my bed. So we'll go in and we'll have a look. So this quilt the top of this quilt was not made by me. It was made by a really good friend of mine, and I quilted it. Now, the quilting that I've chosen to use for this is just really straight lines. Really simple, just holding the 3 layers together. I'll show you a big picture of the quilt, and it's deliberately been done like that for one, time. It is a rather large quilt, but also the fabric is the feature here, not the quilting. So yeah, I've just used the block itself to make the decisions about where the lines are going to be. When it comes time to mark designs to hand quilt, that's a whole different thing. And if people are interested, I might do a deep dive on that. But that's what this quilt looks like. All right, from here we're going to start with some equipment. I prefer to quilt in a hoop. Now, the hoop can either be the floor one, which you'll probably see me drag from the corner over there over here, or just one of these ones. Now, there is a difference. Embroidery hoops won't work as quilters hoops. When you've got a quilt, there's a lot of weight there. There's a lot of bulk, there's 3 layers, and so you need something that's pretty sturdy that can handle it. Now, these hoops are also an investment. If you look after them, they will look after you. I have quite honestly had this one for probably close on 25 years, and it has helped me quilt many a quilt. I prefer working in a hoop because it holds the layers together, it holds them tightly and tautly, and I can feel things on the back as well as I can see things on the front. The other thing that having a hoop does is that it helps, well, there's a lot of things. Number one, I know where I'm up to because I can see the hoop, but also it gives something a little bit more stability, something to hold on to. My absolute preferred option, though, is my floor hoop frame. I don't know what we're calling it. I would love the full frame arrangement to hand quilt with, but I do not have the space for that. I have the space for a lot of things, but the space for that is not one of those things. Maybe one day. Anyhow. So, I bought this one a few years ago. I bought this one a few years ago. It is a Grace frame. I don't think that they make the wood anymore. I'm not sure. I bought this as something of a little bit of an impulse buy, as one does when one sees something one has wanted for a long time. And it has helped me quilt probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 quilts, and I suspect it's helped me win awards, or it could just be, you know. I really love working in the frame. It gets it up off the floor. It actually means that I can quilt in summer, hand quilt in summer, which when you're in Australia and it's really, really hot, that's an achievement. It means that there's airflow underneath, which can be important. And it also means that it leaves me 2 hands to be able to do work, manipulate things on the top and on the bottom. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So I have got this set up here. I'm going to try and get the camera to show you. Okay, so here we go. What I've got here is some marking that I have done with a water-soluble pen. Now, I've got this whole thing about pens and marking tools and all of that sort of stuff, but I'm giving a water-soluble pen a little bit of a shot to see how we go. I have tested it. It does mean that if I get it in a spot that I don't want it, that I can quite literally just spray it with water and sponge it up. I can't quite see things as well on the darker fabric as what I can on the light, but that's okay. Now, I have pin basted my quilt, and I've also started quilting some of the bits and pieces here. What I've decided to use for this particular quilt is some Wonderfil Pearle 8. Now, I'm using 2 different threads for this quilt. We've got the Wonderfil Pearle 8. We've also got the Aurifil 12 weight, which I'm using as well. I use a thimble, and when I'm using big stitch, so doing this, I also use a finger cot. So one of those things that you get in the, well, Officeworks here in Australia, but in an office supply store for doing lots of stuff and protecting your finger from paper cuts. Really great for pulling needles and pulling them through. I will keep all of these little bits and pieces together. Now, needles, big stitch quilting or quilting using a non-fine, non-traditional thread can be a bit hard on needles. So I use the Bohin Embroidery ones. I am trying out a few different needles at the moment, so we'll just see how we go with this. And I've got 3 different colours of the Pearle 8, and this is the Aurifil 6724, and I use this a lot. Like, this is my 3rd or 4th big spool of this. It's a standard cotton that I used. It's what I used in the background of the big star quilt. It's what I used for the William Morris quilt as well, and for a lot of the background on a couple of the other quilts that I've made and that I've quilted. So basically speaking, that's all I really need to get going. When I am hand quilting, I don't like to use a really long thread, but also I don't like to use a hugely short one either. So we're making a knot. There it is there. Cool. To bury a knot when we're hand quilting, and this is where I'm going to move my hand underneath, you can use a thimble underneath. I know a lot of people do. I don't. Then I'm going to pick a spot. Now I'm going to pick one right about here. And I'm going to come in from a little way away. Like so. And then we're going to give that a little tug and a little pull. Like so. And then we're going to grab that end and pull it under. Let's trim that. I'll trim it and pull it under. Now, one of the things that I like about this particular hoop is that we'll move around and I can manipulate which direction it's going in and what it's doing. The point of the exercise when hand quilting is to try and have the same length stitch on the front and the back. And it can take a little bit of time for you to get your eye in when that's happening. So I suggest, if it's a high stakes piece, that you start in a backgroundy place so that you can get some sense of yourself and where things are going when you get in the groove, before you start working on somewhere that's important. Now, having said that, when the quilt is finished, you won't necessarily see every single little imperfection. Or more to the point, you might, but other people won't. And we can actually rely on that. Now, I don't know whether I'm going to cable this or whether I'm just going to go round and round. I think I might just go round and round. So now I'm trying to work out where that's going. And this is where the colour thread, sorry about that, can become a bit of a feature. What you would have seen in particularly the Big Sky Star quilt, is that I used thread colour as a way to show and to define. And in some ways I'm doing the same thing with this particular quilt. So this bit of the cabling, I think it's cabling, is going to be in like the creamy colour, the ecru. I am going to add some other colour over in this piece of the, over here, you can't see where I'm pointing, over in the quilt, because I wanted to add a little bit of dimension and a little bit of interest in a bit that's a little bit boring in the quilt. There's like a big hole. So all I'm doing here is, you'll see that I'm pinching the fabric to help me get it through the layers. Then I'm rocking so let's see, stabbing in there, then we're rocking it, and I'm using my finger underneath the quilt to sort of land before I bounce back up. Now, we're going to see all sorts of imperfections, not just in the quilting, but in the fabric, and there'll be a whole lot of stuff going on. So basically speaking, I am just going to do 2 lines like this, and then I'll go back the other direction and do the lines, and there's another line that goes that way. That one. And then it goes the other direction that way. And then eventually the bottom will all be done. When it comes to hand quilting other parts, so I'm going to pick on this bit. So when it comes to quilting these sorts of things, I may just decide to do one line up and down these bits. I haven't actually made my mind up yet what it is that I'm going to, or how I'm going to quilt this. I am vibe quilting. So you pull that out. You can start to see how the line is coming together. And that's how I'm hand quilting. So now, anybody got any good TV show recommendations? Because this is going to be a lot of that. Anyhow, I'll see you next time.